Hello, and welcome to Write On, the podcast from Final Draft. This is the show where we talk about all things screenwriting. I'm your host, Phil Galasso. Today we have an interview with Evan Romansky, creator of Ratched. The series, which serves as an origin story for the iconic character from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, begins in 1947 with a young Mildred Ratched working as a nurse at a leading psychiatric hospital. Beneath her stylish exterior, there lurks a growing darkness.
Excuse me. You're eating my peach.
I haven't eaten anything.
All right, you're holding my peach.
So?
So it's mine. The peach, in your hand.
I don't see your name on it.
And who would do that?
Do what?
Put their name on a peach.
Somebody who really wanted it.
And how would one go about such a thing?
I don't know. Felt tip?
No one has ever put their name on a peach with a felt tip.
I've seen it done.
No, you haven't.
Maybe a pen. You could gouge your name into it with a pen.
That's my peach. I brought it here.
And I bought it here.
I paid for it.
Maybe you stole it.
Maybe I didn't.
Well, what if you did? Then whose peach is it?
Still mine.
I don't know. What I do know is I saw it rolling around in the icebox, so I brought it here. So now it's mine.
She kind of does have a point. I mean, in a situation like this, the peach is sort of like cash, so it belongs to whoever's.
No one is talking to you.
Ooh, someone's cranky. She sure could use a peach.
That is my peach.
No, it's a peach in my mouth. Sorry.
You are not sorry. But you will be.
Oh, really? What? What are you gonna do about it? What are you, deaf?
No. Just thinking of all the things I'm going to do about it.
Evan and I discuss what drew him to the character of Nurse Ratched, the script's unconventional journey to the screen, working with Ryan Murphy, and more. Check it out. I'm here with Evan Romansky, creator of Netflix's Ratched. Evan, thank you for taking the time to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So if somehow people live under a rock and they haven't had a chance to see it yet, how would you describe Ratched to a viewer?
I would describe it as a feminist horror set 15 years before the events of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It tells the origin story of nurse Mildred Ratched as she mysteriously arrives at a leading psychiatric hospital where we come to find her motives stretch far beyond patient care.
So what was it that initially drew you to this, well-established character from, if people haven't seen the film, they may have read the play.
Well, so I originally wrote it when I was in film school at Loyola Marymount. And at the time, when you're a film student trying to be a writer in this industry, the hardest thing to do is to get someone enticed enough to read your work. And so I had worked a lot of internships at the time, and I'd really seen just kind of what the appetite was for projects based on IP. I thought, okay, well, that actually might be a nice route to try and go to at least get someone to read some of my writing and maybe open the door for them to read my other projects. And so Nurse Ratched kind of just popped in my head. I mean, Cuckoo's Nest was always one of my favorite movies and books. I loved that, she was this incredibly complex character, but didn't have a backstory to her other than the only thing we know about her is that she was an army nurse. And so I wanted to do something with IP where I wasn't retelling, I was creating and inventing. So I just thought it was this, ripe opportunity to kind of create a backstory that I thought would make sense for her. And so I really just started kind of deconstructing her character and was wondering why I felt like it was McMurphy's overt sexuality that seemed to be her biggest downfall. And so I thought, well, if some of the worst things happened to her life when she embraced her sexuality and made herself vulnerable, then that would make sense as to why that happened. And so it was about starting her in a place where, she is dealing with this burgeoning sexuality for the first time and doesn't quite know what to do with it. And then that changes when, she meets Gwen and starts her on this emotional journey where she feels seen for the first time by another, someone that she can lower this mask of strength that she's been wearing since she was a child for survival and could just be vulnerable and still feel safe.
So you mentioned that you wrote this script in film school, and obviously this project has taken a sort of unconventional journey from script to screen. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was very lucky in just how everything happened. So I graduated from LMU, and for graduating MFA candidates, they put on kind of like this little pitch fest for us. And, it just had some managers, like some, lower level producers, things like that, were pitching our thesis projects to. And it's kind of like speed dating. So you literally get like 5 minutes at the table and then move on to the next one. So it's not the most comfortable situation. But so I met my manager through that, Jacob Epstein. He really took to Ratched, and I was lucky that he had previously worked at UTA. So we actually kind of knew Michael Douglas a little bit, and Michael produced the original movie. And so he emailed me and he's like, hey, I love this. He's like, the rights are an issue, but I want to see maybe what I can do with it. And 2 weeks later, Michael Douglas was on board. And funny enough too, so my manager was flying to New York and he texted me and he was like, you'll never guess who's on my flight. And he's like, it's Michael Douglas. And so he's like, I have to go up to him, after the flight and talk to him. And so he ended up going up to him after the flight, and Michael had just read it and he was like, yeah, he's like, I love it. He's like, I want to do it. And so we thought Michael actually had the rights to it, but he didn't. They actually were with Saul Zaentz, who had passed away. So they were in his estate. And so Michael was like, hey, like, I know, Paul, who runs the estate, and know him really well. Like, I think we can get a deal done. So we sent it to the Zaentz estate. They read it. They loved it. They had said that, they'd gotten submitted a lot of different Cuckoo's Nest World TV shows over the years. But that they thought this was like finally like the angle to go through. And so we got them on board to agree to do it pretty quickly. And then I got set up at CAA with Praveen Pandian and Mother Agent Joe Cohen, who happened to be Ryan Murphy's agent. Joe was like, well, let's send this to Ryan. And he hadn't sent anything to Ryan since American Crime Story. And I guess Ryan had been asking like, hey, where's my next American Crime Story? And so Joe sent him Ratched. And the next day he was like, hey, Ryan wants to meet you. Like, he's really interested in doing this. And it was a very surreal moment because I was, 2 months out of grad school and, had been looking for like assistant jobs, at the time, and was thinking, that I was going to try and climb this TV ladder for a few years. And so just overnight, it, really happened, and met with Ryan, and, he was amazing, and just talked about how much he loved it. And we really, gelled on, what we wanted the first season to be and the series to be. And, it took him about a year to work out a rights deal, which can be very complicated, especially with estates. Mm-hmm. We had a couple hairy moments in it, but we got it done. And then, set it up at Netflix, had Sarah attached to it, and just took off from there.
What a whirlwind. To talk a little bit about, you wrote this on spec, but then all of a sudden you're actually making a show. What, how much ahead had you planned? Did you have multiple seasons in your head already? Or is it something that you fleshed out in the writer's room? What was that experience like?
So we had the first season of where we wanted to go with it. What are the big tentpoles of it? We knew where we generally wanted to go in future seasons and where we kind of wanted to catch up to. But we really had that first season pretty well mapped out and got into the writer's room. And of course, everything, evolves in the writer's room, and, how we're getting to certain points, definitely changed a little bit. But yeah, we had a pretty good handle on what we wanted that first season to be, and kind of where we wanted to end it, and kind of just generally where we were going to go in the future of the show.
Was there, one of the things that struck me watching it is just how, the attention to detail and the depth of detail, with the period setting and the hospital and all that. Was there research involved, just for visual references, for story references? What was that process?
Yeah. So oddly enough, my original pilot, definitely did not have all of that in it. That was really something that Ryan, immediately when I met with him, he knew exactly what he wanted the show to feel like and look like and sound like. And so that was really him, with his director's hat on. He did direct our first 2 episodes, really wanting to go that direction and make it, very stylized and very colorful, which I think some people were kind of expecting, like, oh, this is a Cuckoo's Nest thing. Like, it's gonna, where is like the drab white uniforms and bland walls? And like, that's not Ryan's style. Like, Ryan loves color. And he loves to use color as a reference, and, really going off of, really using green. Like, green is very prominent in our show, just to represent different characters and their, violence and lust and oppression. And so color was a big thing, especially for him. And, using references like Vertigo, and, using that for, scores and just creating that real atmosphere to the show, which is something that, like, as much as a writer as you think like you're going to really incorporate that into your script, like, it needs someone like Ryan to come in and be like, all right, this is what the aesthetic is going to be like. This is what it's going to feel like. And it just really heightened the show up to another level.
Did you guys write all of the scripts before filming, or was it a process where you were writing while they were filming?
So we wrote, I want to say 5 episodes before we started filming. And it was very beneficial to still be writing as we started filming, And, it's my first time on set. So like, it was a really cool experience for me just to see how much, production is starts to influence the writing. Like someone so Judy, who plays Nurse Bucket, Judy Davis, who is absolutely amazing. It's like someone like her, like she brought so much comedy to the role, like even a little bit more than I think we were thinking. And so once we started seeing her like interacting with Sarah and started seeing like this levity she was bringing, like, okay, we got to start writing to this because this is amazing. And so yeah, it was very beneficial, and just seeing how everything was playing out and making adjustments as you go. And I mean, like the writing is never done until you're absolutely finished shooting the episode. And even then, there might be pickups. So you have to write some pickups. Like the writing's not over really, I guess, until the show's actually out.
Just jumping back a bit, when did you first get the storytelling bug? Were you a kid? Was it later on?
Definitely as a child. So my mom was a teacher. She was an elementary school teacher. She was also a phenomenal writer. I think I definitely got my writing ability from her. When I was a kid, I remember in second grade, we had to write a 1-page story about a day in the life of like you and your shadow. And I ended up writing like a 22-page story about it. And like, I was like the kid staying in from recess just to keep writing. And so really kind of just evolved from there. I was a big like sports player growing up. Like I was big into baseball, like thought that was going to be my career path, but always was writing. Writing was really kind of my therapy. I mean, I was always kind of an anxious kid and kind of dealt with anxiety, most of my life. So it was very therapeutic to me to just kind of escape and go into another world, go into the mindset of another character. I kind of dabbled in everything growing up writing. Like I remember in high school, like I tried to write a novel, which was a complete disaster. And I was like, I don't have the patience for this, and gave up. Then I got into journalism and, worked on the newspaper in high school. Really thought that's what I wanted to do, like write sports, columns and everything like that. So then I went to Ohio University for broadcast journalism, started doing like more on-air stuff, and quickly realized I hated being on air. And then I didn't like the aspect of reporting because it wasn't creative enough for me. And so, I'd always loved movies and TV. And I remember I was watching No Country for Old Men, which was one of my favorite movies. I was so taken just by the whole writing of it, the dialogue of it. And I had never read a screenplay before. And I was like, first time I really thought, like, I wonder what a screenplay looks like. And so I downloaded the script and read it and was just blown away. And I was like, wow, the writer really is kind of doing everything. Like, this is pretty cool. And so just started screenwriting. I had used, there's like some like free screenwriting software where you could like write your own scenes and stuff and put them on the internet, and then have people comment on them, like saying like, hey, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong. And so it's really kind of a little crash course in just the early days of screenwriting. But yeah, wrote my first feature when I was in undergrad, took a couple classes there, and I had written a How I Met Your Mother spec of all things that I still love to this day. Like, I love it. I think it's hilarious. And my professor had told me, he's like, I think you have a lot of talent in this. He's like, I think you should consider film school. It would give me time to move to LA, which I'd never been to, and, build connections while just having time to just write and not have to worry about a 9-to-5 job or anything. I didn't even know at the time that they had, masters in screenwriting. So it was all new to me. But yeah, and got into LMU and absolutely loved my time there. And it was a 3-year program. So it gave me time to just really write and find my voice. And I'd started off writing more dramedies. I really used like Little Miss Sunshine was a big inspiration to me, because I'd read how, Michael Arndt had like kind of written that script kind of about like his own family and like this dysfunctional family that he had. And I was like, oh, well, I kind of have a dysfunctional family. Like, I'm going to write about my family. And that became like my first feature. And so I was kind of more like in that space, and then got to LMU and, really just kind of evolved as a writer and found where my voice was, and, realized I kind of gravitated toward a little darker material. And it turned into like the first like real script I feel like I'd written was this like dystopian thriller coming of age story called Bone. And it was the first time where I was like, okay, like, I think I can actually write. I think I might be able to actually do this.
And how many scripts were there between that and Ratched?
Probably another 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably wrote 5. There's probably like 3 features and 1.5 pilots before Ratched. There's one pilot that just never got finished. But
so, obviously when you're in a writer's room, it's one thing, but when you're just starting out on a project, what's your writing process? Are you someone who, it takes a while for something to, germinate? Do you obsessively outline and note take? What's your writing process?
I'm definitely an obsessive outliner. In film school, everyone lamented my outlining process because they had to give notes on our outlines, and everyone would turn in like 5-page outlines and I would turn in like 25-page outlines. And I would always just be like, well, no, this is for me though. So like, you don't have to read it all, but this is for me. This is my process. So yeah, definitely big outliner. Before I get to outlining though, I really pour everything into just one messy like Google Doc essentially. And it's kind of just where I get all my thoughts out. I'll have like lines of dialogue in there, character descriptions, like, what's happening, like, even like having like, oh, what's going to happen in episode 8, even though I don't even know what's happening in episode 2 yet. I don't even really go back to it ever. It's just like, what I need to kind of get everything out before I feel comfortable enough to start outlining. And, different projects require different levels of outlining. Like I don't write like 30-page outlines for everything, but certain projects require it. And so, yeah, and then music is a huge thing for me. I always try and find music that I feel like matches kind of what I'm writing, especially like scores and things. Like I'm always searching out for scores, and like I feel like I can't really start writing like actual pages until I figure out the music that I'm going to use to inspire me. And then I just kind of have that going, over and over again, in the background as I write. I don't really like writing in silence. So
are you someone who, when you're finally, putting words on the page, are you someone who sets like deadlines for yourself? Are you a morning person? What's a day in the life?
So I used to be a huge night writer. Like I could only like start writing like at midnight, and I would be writing till like 4 or 5 in the morning. It's kind of changed as I've gotten older. I mean, I'm 30 now and I can't stay up as late. So I definitely have gotten better at writing during the day, and being in the writer's room like helped me like being like, hey, I have to write during the day. And so definitely I write in the daytime more, and I try and write at night, but I don't last as long. But yeah, sorry, what was the first part of the question though?
Are you someone who sets deadlines for yourself?
I try to. I will tell my manager that like set a deadline for me. And like that kind of helps me. Like I do like kind of backing myself into a corner a little bit and writing myself out of it. I don't know why. It's kind of just something I've been doing since film school, and I kind of get my best writing done when I'm under a lot of pressure, which actually bodes well for writers' rooms because you always have the pressure to hit a deadline. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely important to set deadlines, because every writer I know, including myself, like we are procrastinators. We will procrastinate till the end of day. So yeah, so setting a deadline is important for me.
You mentioned, the Coen brothers, you mentioned Michael Arndt. Are there any other films or writers or shows that, were important to you or are important to you as, especially as a writer? I do write like, a lot of horror, and The Exorcist was like my favorite movie of all time. And I mean, I just like, that was my first like real like foray into like what horror was and the kind of horror, I really wanted to write. But yeah, I mean, Coen brothers, like I love, as much as I do horror, like I love that tone. I love dark comedy, and I'll watch anything that the Coen brothers do. And in terms of like TV, like Breaking Bad was a huge influence to me, because I was always the kid that like, I didn't, you always get told like, oh, your protagonist has to be likable. Like everyone has to like your protagonist. And I hated that. I'm like, no, like I want an anti-hero who is incredibly flawed and who like I can really, follow on a journey. And, Walter White was just such amazing character work in where he started and where he ended up. It is something that inspired me with Ratched, because I was like, okay, like, TV was rapidly expanding. I'm like, it needs more anti-heroes like this, especially a female anti-hero like Nurse Ratched. Yeah, for sure. I'm curious, this last year has been pretty challenging for everybody. Obviously, you've had some stuff going on. Do you have any tips for staying creative? Do you ever get in a rut and you have like a routine that helps you get out of it? I definitely get in ruts. I think every writer gets in ruts. Yeah, I mean, writer's block is a real thing. It was very challenging during this pandemic. Like, I think like a lot of writers, like I went into it of like, okay, I'm going to use this time to just write and get so much stuff done. And then you kind of realize that it's very easy to get in a rut when you're stuck in isolation. You're doing the same thing every day. You can't leave your house. I mean, as a writer, like you want to be out in the world and experiencing things, because that's what helps influence your writing. And so when you're just stuck at home, going through the same routine every day can really wear on you. And it definitely wore on me. I mean, I went through a lot of bouts of writer's block during the pandemic, because I am somebody that I like to have a change of scenery when I feel like I'm getting kind of stuck, being stuck in an apartment that couldn't really happen. So yeah, so it was really difficult. I mean, I ended up moving during the pandemic to kind of
to kind of break the
it's a change
break
of
it up a little bit. Yeah, it was a change of scenery. Moved into a new place where I had like multiple areas where I could go and kind of like change it up a little bit. But for me, like too, it's like writer's block is such a huge part of my process. I mean, I like to joke that like, out of 30 days of a month, like 28 of those days, there's massive writer's block, but there's 2 days is like where you really get it done. And I think it was actually Tony Gilroy had said that too. He said like he made all of his money in like 3 days a year or something. Cause there were 3 days where it really clicked for him. And I've always felt the same. And so, but it's like, it's so important to go through, those days of writer's block where you are stuck to keep going and keep trying to work your way out of it. And if something's not working, move on to something else, like even a totally different project that you're in a different stage in. And even if you're just getting like something small done on that, like getting like little victories is huge for me. And like feeling like you're actually accomplishing something instead of sitting there staring at a blank screen and banging your head against the wall and being like, why can't I break through on this? That's why it is so important to just be working on other things. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket. And those other things end up helping you, finish something else.
That's good advice. Last question as we wrap up. Obviously, you're still relatively early in your career, but is there something maybe you've learned through throughout this Ratched process maybe that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
Definitely to have patience. I mean, everything happens so fast when the script first got going, and then it slowed down to a crawl when we were waiting for the rights deal to get closed, and then then we got the rights deal closed, and then we set it up at Netflix, and then things pick up again, but then we have to wait. Like we waited like 4 or 5 months to actually get going. And then, we would get little pauses every now and then, just when Ryan's schedule would get too full, from the moment we got like Ryan involved to the moment it came out. I mean, it was 4.5 years. So like it was a process, like, and that thing moved fast, but everything in this industry, like it just like your career just ebbs and flows. And that's the biggest thing I've learned is like the ebbs and flows are real. Like I'll have months where it just feels like nothing is hitting and you're waiting on so many things and waiting on so many people. And then within a week, everything just hits at once and then you're overwhelmed. And then it's like, and then it slows down again. You can really only control what you can control. Once you write the scripts and, get it into your representatives' hands and, they put it out in the world, then there's only so much you can do. You have to wait for someone to, recognize what you saw in that script too. And it only takes one person. Rejection is a huge part of this business. And I think I initially thought with as fast as Ratched moved and, having success right off the bat, I was like, okay, like I didn't just get my foot in the door. I kicked it down. Like it's going to be easy now. Like I'm going to set up this show and this show and this show. And my next show, like we had an amazing A-list actor attached to it, amazing director, thought for sure it was going to sell, and it didn't. And it was like a huge gut punch. And I was like, okay, it was the reality of like, okay, this is a very difficult business to succeed in. And so yeah, you just have to have the patience and, just do the work, but just recognize like, it's not all going to go according to plan. It's not all going to be smooth. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. I think a lot of young writers too, and I was the same, like, you ask like, okay, well, what's your advice to a young writer? And you want that person to reveal like the special sauce to make it. And, I was right out of school interviewing for assistant jobs and, an eye on climbing that 5 to 10 year ladder. And, a month later I had my show set up with Ryan. And so, there's no one path to follow to break in, but there's so many paths to follow. And so like, just meet as many people as you can, because the more people you meet, the more potential paths open up, and write what you're passionate about. But it also doesn't hurt to pay attention to what's being sold and what's being made in the industry. And I think that's something that a lot of young writers overlook. And it's something like if I didn't do those internships and I didn't see like the thirst for IP driven material, like I may have never even written Ratched, and I might not even be working in this industry right now. Is anything you can do to kind of get a leg up on everyone else, the thousands of people who are trying to do the same thing as you, is what you got to do.
Yeah, man, I think there's a lot of nuggets of gold in there. Congrats on the show, Evan, and thanks for taking the time to chat today with me.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks to Evan Romanski for coming on the show. Ratched is streaming on Netflix right now. And as always, thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked this episode, leave us a review. And if you haven't already, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For news about future episodes and more, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @Final Draft Inc. and Instagram @Final Draft Screenwriting. This episode was produced by Kayla Guess with help from associate producer Emma Vranich. Music by T. Kelly. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, write on.